On my 71st birthday, my son left me at the nursing home saying, "Now I can live my life," and abandoned me there. 3 months later, he came to visit me and found my bed empty. The staff member handed him an envelope with the secrets I kept for 48 years. Right then, he started to tremble. It was a Thursday, March 19th, in my condo in Astoria, Queens, New York City. The whole family was there. My son Michael, 48 years old, a certified public accountant who graduated from Queens College. His wife Jessica, 43, who works as an administrative coordinator for a federal agency. And my 2 grandchildren, Ryan, 17, and Emily, 15. I had cooked a big lasagna with garlic bread and Caesar salad, the way I always did for family celebrations. The blow came right as I was getting ready to blow out the candles on my strawberry cake. Michael stood up from his chair at my dining room table, adjusted the expensive navy blue tie Jessica had just given him for his birthday last month, and cleared his throat like he was about to give a presentation at work. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore. I found you a room at Greenview Senior Care Center out in Hicksville, Long Island. It's a great place. They have registered nurses on staff 24/7, activities every day, 3 meals included." His voice was steady, rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. Jessica smiled beside him, like this was the most natural decision in the world, her perfectly manicured red nails drumming against her wine glass. "Mrs. Margaret, it's really for your own good. We drove out there last weekend to visit. It's very clean and well organized," she added, brushing back her freshly highlighted blonde hair. "The rooms are nice and you'll have people your own age to talk to." I felt my whole world collapse. My hand started trembling as I set down the lighter I'd been holding. "But son, I'm perfectly fine here in my home. I don't need special care. I still drive my Honda Civic every day. I do my own grocery shopping at the Key Food, down the block." He cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Mom, it's already decided. The move is scheduled for Saturday morning. I have to focus on my kids now, on my future. You lived your life. Now let me live mine." My heart started racing so fast, I thought it might burst right there in my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table. My grandkids stayed completely silent, both of them staring down at their plates like they couldn't bear to look at me. Ryan's jaw was clenched tight, and I could see Emily wiping away a tear with her napkin. 48 years of sacrifice. 48 years of working as a high school math teacher in the New York City public school system, raising him alone after his father died when Michael was just 7 years old, helping him through college when money was so tight I had to take on weekend tutoring jobs, helping with the down payment on his first apartment when he graduated. And this was how he repaid me. But Michael, this home was built with so much love, so many memories. I could hear my voice breaking, but I tried to stay strong. He didn't even let me finish. "The condo is already sold, Mom. I need the money to expand my accounting firm and keep paying for the kids' private school tuition. St. Francis Academy costs $28,000 a year per kid. Do you know how much that adds up to?" The room fell into complete silence, except for the sound of my grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I looked around at this dining room where I'd hosted every birthday, every Christmas, every Easter for decades. The same table where I'd helped Michael with his homework every single night. The same kitchen where I'd packed his lunch every morning before school. Jessica reached over and patted Michael's hand like she was congratulating him for being so decisive. "It's what's best for everyone, really. You'll see, Mrs. Margaret. Change can be good at any age." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw that beautiful cake right at the wall. But instead, I just sat there, feeling smaller and more invisible than I'd ever felt in my entire life. "When do I have to be out?" I whispered. "Saturday morning at 9. The movers are coming at 8 to pack up whatever you're taking with you. Just the essentials, though. Your new room isn't very big." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a discussion. This wasn't even a family meeting. This was an announcement. My own son was basically evicting me from the home I'd worked my entire life to pay for. If you think that was shocking, you need to hear the rest of this story. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what you would do if you were in my place. Because trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. Let me go back a little and tell you how I got here. Because what happened next What I discovered about my son and what I decided to do about it, well, let's just say Michael had no idea what he was setting in motion that night. My name is Margaret Ann Williams. I'm 71 years old, and I taught high school mathematics for 45 years in the New York City public school system, mostly at Jackson Heights High School in Queens. I've lived in the same two-bedroom condo in Astoria, Queens, since 1988, a place I bought with more sacrifice than you can imagine. My son Michael was born on July 15th, 1978. When he was just 7 years old, my husband Robert died in a devastating car accident on Interstate 87 upstate, coming home from a work conference in Albany. One rainy Tuesday evening in November, a drunk driver ran a red light and changed our lives forever. Overnight, I became a widow with a small child and a teacher's salary that barely covered our basic needs in New York City. But I was absolutely determined. My son was going to study, get a profession, be somebody important in life, no matter what it cost me. For years, I worked wherever I could find extra income. I taught full-time at Jackson Heights High, tutoring struggling students in algebra and geometry after school hours, and on weekends I ran private tutoring sessions right here at my kitchen table. Michael grew up watching me grade papers until midnight, watching me stretch every dollar until it screamed. I made his lunches every morning, helped him with homework every evening, and never once complained about how exhausted I was. When Michael was in high school, he was a good student but not exceptional. He played on the junior varsity basketball team, had a small group of friends, and seemed happy enough. But I could see he was embarrassed sometimes about our modest lifestyle. His friends' parents were doctors, lawyers, business owners. We shopped at discount stores and ate a lot of spaghetti and rice dishes. After graduation, he started at Queens Community College, studying business administration. But in his second year, he came to me with big dreams. "Mom, I want to transfer to a private business school. I want to become a certified public accountant, maybe open my own firm someday." The tuition was going to be $26,000 a year, money we absolutely didn't have. I took on extra tutoring jobs, worked summer school every year, and even sold some of my mother's jewelry to help cover his expenses. When he graduated in 2002 with his accounting degree, I felt like the proudest mother in all of Queens. My baby had made it. Michael met Jessica in 2004 at the accounting firm where he got his first job. She was working as an administrative assistant there, fresh out of college herself. Jessica grew up in Westchester County, and her parents owned a small real estate business. From the very beginning, I could tell she thought our family was beneath her social expectations. She was pretty, always perfectly dressed, spoke in this careful way like she was constantly aware of how she sounded. At Sunday dinners, she would make little comments. "This pasta sauce is really salty, Mrs. Williams," or "Have you ever thought about updating this furniture? These styles are so vintage." They got married in May 2006 in a ceremony that cost $38,000. I contributed $8,000 from my savings account, money I'd been putting aside for my own retirement. But seeing Michael happy was worth every penny. Ryan was born in December 2006, and Emily came along in March 2009. I was the grandmother who babysat whenever they needed me, who always had homemade cookies ready, who helped with school projects and attended every soccer game and dance recital. In 2011, Michael came to me with another big request. He wanted to leave his job and open his own accounting practice. "Mom, I can make so much more money if I'm working for myself, but I need startup capital. About $60,000 for office rent, equipment, initial marketing, all that." Once again, I helped him. I took out a second mortgage on my condo, money I really couldn't afford to borrow at my age, but I believed in him. I believed he would build something successful, and maybe, someday, he'd be able to help me the way I'd always helped him. His practice did well. Within a few years, he was handling taxes and bookkeeping for small businesses throughout Queens and Nassau County. They moved from their starter apartment to a nice two-bedroom in Bayside, and Jessica stopped working to focus on the kids and her yoga classes. But in the last 3 years, I started noticing changes in Michael that worried me. He became obsessed with money, always talking about moving up in the world and networking with the right people. Jessica pushed him to join an expensive country club in Manhasset. They enrolled the kids in private school. Michael started wearing designer suits and driving a leased BMW. More troubling, he became increasingly critical of me and our family history. He'd make comments like, "Mom, you really should do something about this old furniture," or "Maybe it's time to think about moving somewhere more appropriate for your age." Last Christmas, Jessica made a comment that still stings. We were opening presents in my living room, and she looked around with this expression of barely disguised disgust. "Michael, don't you think your mother would be more comfortable somewhere with less maintenance? All these stairs? This old building?" What I didn't know yet was that behind all that fake concern about my comfort and safety, they had been working on a plan for months. A plan that would solve all their financial problems and get rid of the embarrassing mother-in-law at the same time. But here's what Michael never knew, what he couldn't possibly have imagined. I had been keeping a secret for 46 years, a secret that could change everything about his precious new life and his carefully constructed identity. 3 long months passed after Michael left me at Greenview Senior Care Center in Hicksville. 3 months of waking up in a sterile room that smelled like disinfectant and sadness, surrounded by people who had been abandoned just like me. The first month, he came to visit me exactly twice, both times for less than 30 minutes. The second month, he managed 1 visit, spending most of it on his phone dealing with urgent client matters. The third month? Nothing. Complete silence. Every time I called his office, his secretary would tell me he was in a meeting or with a client. When I tried his cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. On the rare occasions he actually answered, he'd say he was completely swamped at work, that the kids had major tests coming up, that Jessica was dealing with severe migraines and needed him home. But I wasn't just sitting there feeling sorry for myself. During those 3 months at Greenview, I was paying attention, making connections, and slowly uncovering the truth about what my son had really done to me. The first person who opened my eyes was Lisa Rodriguez, the head nurse on my floor. Lisa was 52 years old, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had worked for 12 years as a paralegal at a prominent law firm in Garden City before switching to nursing. She had kind eyes, but a street-smart attitude that I immediately respected. About 6 weeks into my stay, Lisa knocked on my door during her evening rounds. "Mrs. Williams, can I talk to you for a minute? There's something you need to know about your financial situation here." My heart sank. I had a feeling this conversation wasn't going to be pleasant. "Your son, Michael, paid for exactly 3 months in advance when he brought you here," Lisa explained, sitting down in the plastic chair next to my bed. "The monthly fee for this facility is $3,200. He told our billing department that starting in month 4, you'd be paying it yourself directly from your Social Security and pension income." I felt the blood drain from my face. My total monthly income from Social Security and my small teacher's pension was $4,600. After paying the facility fee, I'd be left with exactly $1,400 for all my personal expenses: clothing, medications not covered by Medicare, phone bills, any little pleasures that might make this place bearable. "Did he mention anything about helping with the costs?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Lisa shook her head. "He was very clear that this was now your responsibility. He said you had plenty of savings to cover it." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling angrier than I'd felt in decades. Michael knew exactly how much money I had coming in every month. He'd helped me organize my finances when I turned 70. He knew this arrangement would leave me essentially broke, but that was just the beginning of the revelations. The second discovery came 2 weeks later, when my grandson Ryan somehow managed to visit me without his parents knowing. The 17-year-old took 2 buses and the Long Island Railroad to get to Hicksville, showing up at my door on a Saturday afternoon looking nervous and upset. "Grandma, I can't stand what Dad did to you," he said, giving me the tightest hug I'd received in months. "This is so wrong, and Mom just keeps saying it was necessary for everyone's well-being." Ryan sat on my bed and told me things that made my blood pressure spike so high I thought I might need medical attention. "Dad sold your condo for $785,000, Grandma. He closed on it 3 weeks ago. He bought this huge house in Short Hills, New Jersey. It's in this gated community called Millbridge Estates. The house cost $620,000. I could barely process what I was hearing. Michael had sold my home, the place where he grew up, where we'd shared countless family dinners and holidays, and used most of the money to upgrade his own lifestyle. "There's more, Grandma," Ryan continued, his voice getting quieter. "He used another $60,000 to lease a brand new Tesla Model S and renovate his office. He hired 2 new employees and rented a bigger space in this fancy building in Midtown Manhattan." My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. "What about the rest of the money?" "He put about $100,000 into some kind of investment account, and he joined this exclusive country club in Summit. The membership fee alone was $45,000. Ryan looked like he might cry. "Grandma, he's been telling everyone that you're settled comfortably in assisted living and that you're much happier with people your own age." That's when the full scope of my son's betrayal became clear. He hadn't just abandoned me, he'd essentially sold me to pay for his social climbing. But what Ryan told me next made me so furious I could barely think straight. Mom's been bragging to her friends about how they finally have privacy and can entertain properly. Last week at Emily's school fundraiser, I heard her telling Mrs. Patterson from down the street that they solved the mother-in-law situation and now they can live like normal people. I sat there in stunned silence for several minutes. Then I looked at my grandson, this sweet boy who had taken hours out of his day to come see me, and I made a decision that would change everything. "Ryan, I need you to do something for me. Can you keep a secret?" He nodded immediately. "Anything, Grandma. I need you to go to my old bedroom in the condo before your dad finishes clearing it out. In my closet, on the top shelf behind the winter coats, there's a small fireproof safe. The combination is 071578. That's your grandfather Robert's birthday. Inside that safe, there's a sealed manila envelope with "For Michael" written on the front in my handwriting. I need you to bring that envelope to me." "What's in it?" Ryan asked. "Something your father needs to see. Something that's going to change his understanding of who he really is." The third discovery, the one that hurt the most, came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Elena Vasquez, my old neighbor from the condo building, called me about 2 weeks after Ryan's visit. Elena had been like a sister to me for over 15 years. She lived in the apartment directly across the hall, and we'd shared countless cups of coffee and conversations. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I had to tell you what I overheard," Elena said, her voice tight with anger. "Last Tuesday I was at the Gold's Gym in Bayside. You know, the one where I do my water aerobics class? Well, Jessica was there with some of her fancy friends from that country club, and they were talking loud enough for half the locker room to hear." My stomach clenched. I knew whatever Elena was about to tell me would be devastating. She was going on and on about how they finally got rid of the dead weight, and how Michael deserves to live without guilt about his mother dragging him down. She actually said, Margaret, and I quote, "Old people need to know when it's time to step aside and let the next generation succeed." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "But that's not even the worst part," Elena continued. "One of her friends asked if you were adjusting well to the nursing home, and Jessica laughed, Margaret, and said, 'Oh, she'll be fine. Old teachers are used to being around institutional settings. Besides, it's not like she has anywhere else to go.' When I hung up the phone, I sat in my small room and cried for the first time since arriving at Greenview. Not tears of sadness, but tears of rage. Pure, clarifying rage. That evening, Ryan returned with the manila envelope. When I held it in my hands for the first time in decades, I could feel my heart pounding. Inside this envelope was information that would destroy Michael's comfortable new narrative about his life and his family. But before I opened it, I needed to make one more important connection. Lisa Rodriguez had mentioned during one of our conversations that she had a contact who might be able to help me, an attorney named Daniel Brown who specialized in elder law and elder abuse cases. She arranged for him to visit me the following Thursday. Daniel Brown was a tall, serious man in his early 50s, with graying hair and intense brown eyes. He'd been practicing elder law for over 20 years and had seen every kind of family situation imaginable. When I told him my story, he listened without interrupting, taking careful notes. "Mrs. Williams, What you're describing potentially constitutes several forms of elder abuse, he said when I finished. Financial exploitation, abandonment, and possibly fraud if your son misrepresented your living situation or financial needs to sell your property. What are my options? I asked. Well, first, we need to understand exactly what happened to the proceeds from your condo sale. If Michael used that money without your informed consent, especially if he led you to believe you'd have access to those funds for your care, that could be grounds for serious legal action. I nodded, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in months. Second, Daniel continued, you have the right to live wherever you choose, assuming you're mentally competent, which you clearly are. If you want to leave this facility and establish independent housing, you have every legal right to do that. But I don't have enough money for a decent apartment in New York, I said. Daniel smiled slightly. That's where the legal remedies come in. If we can prove financial exploitation, we can potentially recover damages and ensure you have the resources you need for appropriate housing. That's when I decided it was time to reveal my secret weapon. I opened the manila envelope right there in Daniel's presence. Inside were several documents I'd kept hidden for 46 years. Michael's original birth certificate listing Anthony Carter as his biological father, a copy of a written agreement between Anthony and me regarding financial support, bank statements showing regular monthly deposits from Anthony from 1978 through 1995, and a folder containing Anthony's business information and current contact details. Daniel's eyes widened as he reviewed the documents. Mrs. Williams, do you realize what this means in terms of your son's potential inheritance rights and family wealth? I nodded. Anthony Carter owns 3 major real estate development companies in the New York and New Jersey area. According to the last information I have, his personal net worth is somewhere around $15 million. Michael has 3 half-siblings he's never met, and Anthony has never publicly acknowledged his existence. And your son has no idea about any of this? None whatsoever. I made a promise to Anthony when I was pregnant that I would never reveal his identity. In exchange, he provided financial support until Michael turned 18. But that support was just the beginning. I showed Daniel the bank statements from the special savings account Anthony had set up. For 17 years, Anthony had deposited $1,500 every month into an account designated for Michael's future. By the time the payments stopped, the account contained over $300,000 in principal, plus accumulated interest. Where is this money now? Daniel asked. Still in that same account, which is now worth approximately $480,000. I never told Michael about it because I wanted him to build his own character and work ethic. I planned to give it to him when he had children of his own and needed help with college expenses or a home down payment. Daniel sat back in his chair, clearly impressed by the complexity of the situation. Mrs. Williams, your son essentially abandoned you and took your home to fund his lifestyle upgrade while sitting on top of a family secret that could connect him to millions of dollars in wealth. The irony is almost incredible. It's more than ironic, Mr. Brown. It's justice. Michael spent his whole life embarrassed about our modest background, desperate to climb the social ladder, willing to abandon his own mother to achieve his image of success. Now he's about to discover that he was born into exactly the kind of wealth and status he's been chasing his entire adult life. But that wasn't all. There was one more piece of information that would make this revelation even more devastating for Michael. Anthony Carter wasn't just wealthy, he was socially prominent. His current wife, Patricia, came from old money in Connecticut. They lived in a mansion in Greenwich, belonged to the most exclusive country clubs, and were regularly featured in the society pages of magazines and newspapers. Michael's legitimate half-siblings, 2 daughters and a son, had graduated from Ivy League universities and now worked in prestigious careers. In other words, Michael had spent years desperately trying to buy his way into the exact social circle he'd been born into, but never knew existed. What do you want to do with this information? Daniel asked. I looked at him steadily. I want my son to understand that his cruelty and abandonment cost him more than he could ever imagine. And I want him to know that the mother he threw away like trash was the only person standing between him and the truth about where he really came from. What I didn't tell Daniel was that I had already decided how I was going to reveal this information to Michael. and it was going to be in a way that would maximize the impact and ensure he understood exactly what his choices had cost him. If you thought the first part of this story was shocking, stay with me, because what I did next changed my son's life forever and taught him a lesson about family loyalty that he'll never forget. The revelation was just the beginning. Those weeks following my meeting with Daniel Brown, I wasn't just sitting in that nursing home feeling sorry for myself. I was planning. And for the first time in months, I felt truly alive again. I had purpose, I had power, and I had information that was going to turn my son's carefully constructed world completely upside down. Lisa Rodriguez became more than just my nurse during this time. She became my closest ally and confidant. Every evening after her shift officially ended, she would stop by my room and we'd talk about my strategy. Lisa had seen enough family betrayals during her years at Greenview to understand exactly what Michael had done to me, and she was more than willing to help me fight back. "Mrs. Williams, I've watched too many children dump their parents here and then disappear," she told me one evening as we sat by my window, watching the sunset over the parking lot. "What your son did was particularly cruel because he had the financial means to arrange better care for you, or even help you maintain your independence. He chose to abandon you to upgrade his lifestyle." Lisa had already spoken to several attorneys during her years as a paralegal, so she understood the legal implications of what we were planning. But more than that, she believed in justice. "Some people need to learn the hard way that actions have consequences," she said. The first part of my plan involved documenting everything. With Daniel's help, I requested copies of all the paperwork related to the sale of my condo. What we discovered was even worse than I'd suspected. Michael had used a power of attorney document I'd signed years earlier, originally intended for emergency medical decisions, to handle the real estate transaction. But here's the crucial detail. He never informed me about the sale price, never asked for my approval of the buyer, and never discussed how the proceeds would be used. According to Daniel, this constituted clear financial exploitation under New York elder abuse laws. "Your son essentially stole your house from you," he explained during one of our phone calls. "He had a legal obligation to use that money for your care and benefit, not his own social advancement." The second part of my plan was more personal. I needed to make sure Michael understood not just the legal consequences of his actions, but the emotional devastation he'd caused. I spent hours writing and rewriting a letter that would accompany the revelation about his biological father. Every word had to be perfect, every sentence had to hit with maximum impact. But I also knew that the letter alone wouldn't be enough. I needed the reveal to happen in a way that would be impossible for Michael to ignore or minimize. That's when Lisa suggested something brilliant. "What if he comes here looking for you and finds the room empty except for an envelope?" she said. "Let him think you've disappeared completely. Let him panic for a while before he opens it and learns the truth." I loved this idea immediately. Michael had spent 3 months treating me like I was already dead. Now he was going to experience what it felt like to think I actually was gone, and then discover that his indifference had cost him everything. During this planning phase, Ryan continued to visit me secretly every few weeks. The poor kid was clearly struggling with the family situation, feeling torn between loyalty to his parents and love for his grandmother. But he was also old enough to understand that what his father had done was wrong. "Grandma, Dad keeps telling people that you're adjusting beautifully to your new life and that you've made lots of friends," Ryan told me during one of his visits. "But when I ask if we can visit you more often, he always has some excuse about why it's not convenient." "And what does your mother say?" Ryan's face darkened. "Mom acts like you don't exist anymore. She redid your old bedroom into a craft room within 2 weeks of you leaving. She bought all new furniture and everything. It's like she couldn't wait to erase any evidence that you ever lived there." This information confirmed what I already suspected. This abandonment wasn't just about money or convenience. For Jessica, getting rid of me had been a personal victory. She'd finally eliminated the reminder of Michael's modest background, the evidence of his family's working-class history. But what Ryan told me next gave me an idea for making the revelation even more impactful. "Dad's been obsessed with researching our family genealogy lately," Ryan explained. "He hired some company to trace our ancestors. He keeps talking about wanting to find out if we have any distinguished relatives in our background. Mom thinks it's because he's embarrassed about Grandpa Robert being a mechanic and you being a public school teacher. Perfect. Michael was literally paying money to search for the prestigious family connections he already had but didn't know about. The irony was so complete it was almost artistic. I decided to include this information in my letter to him. I wanted him to know that while he was spending money to research fake prestige, he was abandoning the one person who could have connected him to real wealth and status. The third part of my plan involved my own independence. I wasn't going to stay at Greenview indefinitely, waiting for Michael to have some miraculous change of heart. With Daniel's help, I began researching apartment options that would fit my actual budget. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in a building that catered specifically to active seniors. The rent was $2,400 per month, which left me with enough money from my pension and Social Security to live comfortably. The building had a doorman, a small fitness center, and was within walking distance of Prospect Park. But more than that, the location was strategically chosen. Park Slope was exactly the kind of trendy, upscale neighborhood that Michael and Jessica aspired to live in. I wanted them to know that I was thriving in a place they could only dream of affording in Manhattan, while they were stuck with their mortgage payments in suburban New Jersey. During my apartment hunting, I also made another decision that felt incredibly empowering. I contacted my old principal at Jackson Heights High School and asked if they needed any substitute teachers or tutoring coordinators. Despite being 71, I still had my teaching certification, and I missed working with students. "Margaret, we would love to have you back in any capacity," Principal Martinez told me during our phone conversation. "Your reputation here is legendary. Half our current math department learned their teaching methods from you." The idea of returning to work, even part-time, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to be some discarded old woman warehoused in a nursing home. I was going to be an active, independent person living life on my own terms. The fourth part of my plan was the most delicate, deciding exactly when and how to reveal the truth to Michael. I wanted the timing to maximize the emotional impact. After some careful thought, I chose June 20th, exactly 3 months after my birthday disaster. It felt symbolically appropriate, but I also wanted Michael to experience some consequences for his abandonment before he learned about Anthony. I instructed Daniel to begin legal proceedings to recover the misused funds from the condo sale. I wanted Michael to be dealing with legal pressure, financial stress, and family drama when the revelation about his parentage hit him. "The goal isn't just to shock him," I explained to Lisa. "I want him to understand that his cruelty toward me cost him everything he actually wanted in life. I want him to realize that the mother he threw away like trash was his only connection to the wealth and status he's been desperately trying to achieve." Lisa nodded approvingly. "And when he comes crawling back, begging for forgiveness, that's when he'll learn that some betrayals can't be undone, that some relationships, once broken by greed and selfishness, can never be repaired." During the final weeks of my preparation, something unexpected happened that made my upcoming revenge even sweeter. Elena Vasquez called to tell me that Michael and Jessica's new lifestyle was already causing them problems. "Margaret, the gossip in the neighborhood is that they're struggling financially," Elena reported. "Apparently that big house and the country club membership are costing more than Michael anticipated. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store told me that Jessica was complaining about the property taxes being $8,000 higher than they expected." This information was delicious. Michael had abandoned me and sold my home to fund a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. Meanwhile, he was sitting on top of a family secret that could solve all his financial problems. If only he hadn't been so cruel to the one person who knew the truth. But the most satisfying piece of information came from Ryan during his final secret visit before my planned revelation. "Grandma, I think Dad's starting to realize he made a huge mistake," Ryan said, looking more mature than his 17 years. "Last week he asked me if I thought you were really okay at Greenview. When I told him I wasn't sure because we never visit you, he got this weird look on his face, like he was feeling guilty for the first time." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that if he wanted to know how you were doing, maybe he should pick up the phone and call you himself instead of asking his teenage son." Ryan grinned with satisfaction. He didn't have a good answer for that. I realized that Michael's guilt was probably making the anticipation even worse for him. Some part of him knew that what he'd done was wrong, but his pride and his new lifestyle priorities were preventing him from facing it directly. The revelation was going to hit him at the exact moment when his conscience was already making him vulnerable. On June 19th, the day before my planned confrontation, I moved out of Greenview and into my new apartment in Park Slope. Lisa helped coordinate everything, and Daniel handled the legal paperwork. By evening, I was sitting in my own living room for the first time in 3 months, looking out at a tree-lined street and feeling more hopeful about the future than I had in years. I called Ryan that evening to let him know I was safe and settled. "Tomorrow, your father is going to learn some things that will change his life forever," I told him. "I want you to be prepared for that. Things are going to get very complicated in your family." "Grandma, whatever you're planning, I support you," Ryan said firmly. "What Dad did was wrong, and he needs to face the consequences." That night, I sat at my new kitchen table and wrote the final version of my letter to Michael. Every word was chosen for maximum impact. I wanted him to understand not just the facts about his parentage, but the full scope of what his betrayal had cost him. The next morning, I called Lisa at Greenview and gave her the signal. "It's time," I said simply. What Michael didn't know was that in a few hours, he was going to walk into an empty nursing home room and discover that the mother he'd discarded had vanished, along with his only connection to the life he'd always dreamed of having. But what I didn't know yet was how Anthony Carter would react when his abandoned son suddenly appeared in his life, desperate and humiliated, with no idea how to handle the wealth and status he'd discovered too late. Stay with me, because the confrontation that's coming next will show you exactly what happens when a greedy, ungrateful child finally faces the consequences of their choices. Subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this story. Friday, June 20th, 11:30 in the morning. I was sitting in my beautiful new apartment in Park Slope, sipping coffee and reading the New York Times, when my phone rang. It was Lisa calling from Greenview. "He's here," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Michael just walked into the lobby asking to see you. He looks nervous as hell." My heart started racing, but not with fear, with anticipation. After 3 months of planning, the moment had finally arrived. "Remember what we discussed," I told Lisa. "Tell him I'm not available, but there's something waiting for him in my room. Already on it. I'm going to make him sweat a little first." 20 minutes later, Lisa called back. "Margaret, you should have seen his face. When I told him you weren't here and that he needed to go to your room to understand why, he turned completely white. His hands were actually shaking as he walked down the hallway." What Lisa told me next about Michael's reaction was everything I'd hoped for, and more. According to Lisa, Michael stood in my empty room for nearly 10 minutes, just staring at the envelope lying on the stripped bed. She watched through the partially open door as he picked it up, set it down, paced around the room, and picked it up again. Finally, with trembling fingers, he opened it. The envelope contained 3 things: his original birth certificate listing Anthony Carter as his biological father, the latest bank statement from the secret account Anthony had established, showing a current balance of $483,000, and a 3-page letter I had spent weeks perfecting. The letter read, "Michael, for 46 years, I protected you from the truth about your parentage because I wanted you to grow up with the love and stability that Robert Williams provided. Robert chose to be your father when your biological father, Anthony Carter, refused to acknowledge your existence. Anthony Carter owns Carter Development Group, one of the largest real estate companies in the tri-state area. His personal net worth exceeds $15 million. He lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, with his wife Patricia and your 3 half-siblings, Catherine, 41, an investment banker, Jonathan, 38, a federal prosecutor, and Melissa, 35, a pediatric surgeon. All 3 graduated from Ivy League universities and move in exactly the social circles you've been desperately trying to join. For 17 years, Anthony deposited $1,500 monthly into a trust account for your future. That money, with accumulated interest, now totals nearly $500,000. I never told you about it because I wanted you to develop character and work ethic on your own. But your treatment of me, abandoning me to a nursing home, selling my house to fund your social climbing, treating me like an embarrassment to be hidden away, has shown me that you never developed the character I hoped to see in you. You spent your entire adult life ashamed of our modest background, embarrassed by my career as a public school teacher, desperate to buy your way into wealth and status. Meanwhile, you were born into exactly the privilege you've been chasing, but you were too busy being cruel to the one person who knew the truth. You have a biological father who could have opened doors to the exact lifestyle you wanted. You have half-siblings with the Ivy League educations and prestigious careers you admire. You have access to wealth that would have solved all your financial pressures, but your greed, your ingratitude, and your willingness to abandon your own mother have cost you the only connection you had to that world. Anthony Carter has been paying for your existence since 1978, but he has never wanted a relationship with you. Now, as a middle-aged man with a failed character, you can try to introduce yourself to him and see how warmly he welcomes his abandoned son who threw away his own mother like garbage. I am no longer at this facility. I have moved to a new life where I'm surrounded by respect and dignity, things I never received from my own son. You will not find me, and you do not deserve to know where I am. You wanted to live your own life without the burden of caring about your mother. Now you can do exactly that. Permanently. The son I raised with love and sacrifice died the night you told me I was moving to a better place. The stranger who sold my home and abandoned me to chase status doesn't deserve to know the family secrets I protected for decades. Margaret Williams, your former mother. Lisa told me that Michael's legs actually gave out when he finished reading the letter. He sat down hard in the plastic chair and stared at the documents for another 15 minutes. Then he started calling my name, rushing up and down the hallways, demanding to know where I was. "Sir, your mother checked out this morning," Lisa told him firmly. She left no forwarding address and specifically requested that her location not be disclosed to family members. But she can't just disappear. I'm her son. The same son who hasn't visited her in over a month. The same son who placed her here and never once asked how she was adjusting. Lisa's voice was ice cold. Your mother made it very clear that she no longer considers you her next of kin. Michael tried to argue, tried to demand information, even threatened to call the police. But Lisa knew the law. I was a competent adult who had voluntarily left the facility after paying my bill in full. I had every right to relocate without informing anyone, including my son. What happened next was even more satisfying than I'd imagined. According to Ryan, who called me that evening, Michael came home in complete emotional collapse. He walked into their beautiful new house in Short Hills, threw the documents on the kitchen counter, and told Jessica everything. "Dad just sat there crying, Mom," Ryan told me. Actually crying. He kept saying, "I had a rich father this whole time, and I threw away everything for nothing." Mom read the letter and the birth certificate, and I've never seen her look so shocked. But Jessica's shock quickly turned into something much more revealing. Anger at Michael for not knowing about his wealthy parentage sooner. Mom started yelling at Dad, asking how he could not have known something so important about his own family, Ryan continued. She said if he'd found out about Anthony Carter years ago, they could have built the right connections and positioned themselves properly. She was actually angry at Dad for being an unknowing victim of Grandma's secret. This reaction told me everything I needed to know about Jessica's character. Her first concern wasn't the emotional impact of Michael's discovery or empathy for what he was going through. Her first thought was how this information could have been used to their social advantage. Emily, my 15-year-old granddaughter, had a very different reaction. Ryan told me she spent the evening in her room, crying and asking why they'd been so cruel to me. "Emily keeps saying she wants to find you and apologize," Ryan said. "She feels terrible about what happened at your birthday dinner. She said she wanted to speak up for you, but was too scared to go against Dad and Mom." 2 days later, the legal consequences of Michael's actions began to hit him. Daniel Brown filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services regarding financial exploitation of an elderly person. The investigation would examine Michael's use of the power of attorney to sell my property and use the proceeds for his own benefit rather than my care. But more immediately devastating was what happened when Michael tried to contact Anthony Carter. According to the private investigator Daniel hired to monitor the situation, Michael first attempted to reach Anthony through Carter Development Group's corporate offices. When that failed to produce a response, he showed up at Anthony's Greenwich estate unannounced. The meeting was everything I'd hoped it would be, a complete disaster for Michael. Anthony Carter, now 69 years old, was indeed wealthy and socially prominent. But he was also a man who had spent 46 years successfully hiding his relationship with me and Michael's existence from his legitimate family. Michael's sudden appearance represented a threat to everything Anthony had built. Mr. Carter was polite, but extremely cold, the investigator reported to Daniel. He acknowledged paternity, but made it clear that he considered the financial support he'd provided through 1995 to be the full extent of his obligation. When Michael mentioned his financial difficulties and asked about joining the family business, Mr. Carter's response was immediate and brutal. Anthony told Michael that he was not welcome in the family business, that his legitimate children knew nothing about Michael's existence, and that any attempt to publicize their relationship or make financial demands would be met with legal action. "You are a 48-year-old stranger to me," Anthony reportedly said. "I fulfilled my financial obligations to your mother decades ago. Whatever your current situation, it has nothing to do with me or my family." En Ditulk, when Michael tried to explain that he'd recently discovered the truth and was hoping to build a relationship, Anthony's response was devastating. "A man who abandons his own mother to chase money is exactly the kind of person I would never want associated with my name or my business. Your character speaks for itself." The irony was perfect. Michael had abandoned me, hoping to climb the social ladder, only to discover that his behavior made him exactly the kind of person his wealthy biological father despised. But Anthony wasn't finished. He made two things crystal clear. First, that Michael should never contact him or his family again. And second, that if Michael caused any embarrassment or scandal by publicizing their relationship, Anthony had the resources and connections to make Michael's life very difficult. Michael came home from Greenwich completely crushed. According to Ryan, he spent the next week in a state of emotional collapse, barely eating, unable to focus on work, constantly calling my old phone number hoping I'd answer. "Dad keeps saying he lost everything and that he destroyed his life for nothing," Ryan told me during one of our secret phone calls. "He's been trying to find you everywhere. He even hired a private detective." "And what does your mother think about all this?" "Mom's furious. She's saying that Dad mismanaged the situation and that if he'd handled things better with Anthony, they could have been accepted into the family." Ryan paused. "Grandma, I think Mom's thinking about leaving Dad. She's been looking at apartment listings and talking to a divorce attorney." This news was particularly satisfying. Jessica had pushed Michael to abandon me so they could live like normal people without the embarrassment of his working-class mother. Now that the social climbing had backfired spectacularly, she was ready to abandon him just as quickly. 3 weeks after the revelation, Michael finally tracked me down through Daniel's law office. He came to my apartment building in Park Slope, but the doorman, acting on my instructions, wouldn't let him up. Instead, Michael stood on the sidewalk for over an hour, looking up at the building, occasionally calling my name. Neighbors began to stare. Finally, the building manager threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. But Michael left something with the doorman, a handwritten letter begging for forgiveness, promising to make everything right, pleading for a chance to explain himself. I read it once and threw it away. Some betrayals can't be undone with apologies. Today, 6 months later, I live in my beautiful apartment in Park Slope with a lovely view of Prospect Park. I go for walks every morning. I volunteer as a math tutor at the local community center twice a week, and I've even joined a book club with other active seniors in the neighborhood. I'm 71 years old, and for the first time in decades, I'm living entirely for myself. Michael's life, meanwhile, has completely fallen apart. The legal investigation into financial elder abuse resulted in a settlement requiring him to return $250,000 to me for the unauthorized use of my property sale proceeds. His accounting practice lost several major clients when word spread about his family troubles, and the stress of managing his oversized mortgage and country club fees has put him in serious financial difficulty. Jessica filed for divorce in September, taking half of their remaining assets and moving back to her parents' house in Westchester with Emily. Ryan chose to stay with his father, but he visits me every weekend and calls me his real family. Most ironically of all, Michael's desperate attempts to contact Anthony Carter again resulted in a cease and desist order. Anthony's attorneys made it clear that any further contact would result in harassment charges. Michael had finally found his wealthy father, only to discover that money can't buy acceptance from someone who finds your character repulsive. The secret account with $483,000? I donated it to a scholarship fund for children of single mothers at Jackson Heights High School, ensuring that Anthony Carter's money would help students from exactly the kind of working-class background Michael learned to be ashamed of. Michael tried one last time to reach me through Ryan, sending a message that he'd learned his lesson and wanted to rebuild our relationship. My response was simple. Some lessons come too late. Your mother died the night you told her to move to a better place. I'm just Margaret now, and Margaret doesn't have a son. The most beautiful part of this entire experience has been discovering that I don't need Michael's approval, Jessica's acceptance, or Anthony's acknowledgement to live a fulfilling life. I spent 70 years defining myself through my relationships with other people. Now I know that my worth comes from my own character, my own choices, and my own dignity. And the sweetest irony? Michael spent his whole life embarrassed by his mother, the public school teacher from Queens. But I'm the one who ended up with class, while he revealed himself to be exactly the kind of person that true wealth and status will never accept. I am finally living my own life, and it's more beautiful than I ever imagined it could be. If this story touched your heart, or if you've been through something similar with ungrateful family members, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of overcoming family betrayal and finding strength in independence. And watch now the story that's playing on your screen, because everyone deserves to know that it's never too late to choose dignity over desperation.